Okay, ready to go. And here, what we need to do is receive rooted into our machine. Okay, and it says here we have to beef up our kernel. We need initrd support. We need RAM disk support. We need E2 file system support, and we need ISO 9660 CD-ROM support. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and extract my kernel. And while I'm extracting the kernel, we actually need to go get another package too, syslinux 403. And we get that from kernel.org. And this takes a little bit to find, but if you look in something like, say, tools, no, Linux utilities, and boot utilities, I think it is, should be in there. Okay. So I'm actually going to, I downloaded it, and I'm going to copy that over to my host machine. Actually, I'm going to copy it straight to my mounted LFS partition on my host machine. Okay, we're not really ready to use it yet, but we still have it. You see here my kernel's still going away. And I do want to make it minimal. If you want to add some more drivers, like I said, you can make it all modules config and just take forever to boot. Or you can be selective. It really depends on what you're trying to do with it. And in my case, just a small rescue even CD. Because there are a lot of times when I screw up my bootloader and I hide all my partitions. Okay, don't forget to make MR proper. Clean out any screw-ups or old stale files that you're laying around. And we want to make menu config. First thing we need to look for is init RAM disk. Okay, now here it's very important that you put everything in as a built-in, not a module. Serial device drivers. Block devices. Loopback, I added loopback support as a built-in. Everything goes as a built-in. Now here is a problem with the documentation. It says to make the RAM disk 13384, I think it is. But here I left this as default and didn't run into any issues. This is pretty much one of the only points that I differed from the documentation. Now, a previous live CD I made last year, I looked at how big my RAM disk support was, and it was 4096. So I just left it as is. And as is 4096. File systems, ext2, and I enabled ext3. And CD-ROM, I just ticked one more on. All is built in, no modules. No modules. In the book, or in the documentation, this is something about modules may not be called up in time, and we may get a fail. So, make modules. Install. The modules that we're making are the ones that were default already there. If you need SquashFS too, looking at documentation on what you need to add for SquashFS, that would not have been a bad idea for me here, but I didn't really want to go too far into it, not knowing what I may run into. Really didn't want to differ too much from what I did before, because it really wasn't into making any new waves. Just keeping up with the old stuff. Pre9, build 1. Let's see, build 1. Okay, so this is the tail end of my kernel. Getting ready to be done. Alright, everything is cool. Now here, I'm actually going to name my kernel something very generic, just LFS. Well, LFS kernel. And system map is just going to be system map flat. Config is just going to be config. And the reason why is, there's problems with naming conventions in sys Linux. Okay? And if you throw too many things in your name for your LFS kernel, like LFS dash 6.2 dash kernel dash with networking, you may get into an issue. So I just try to keep it as generic as possible, and it meets the name that the book says to name it, just flat LFS, or the documentation says to name it. It's kind of vague though on what kernel it actually is, but you can always pull uname or A, B, C, D, I don't know. And now it's time to go ahead with sys Linux. Just moving some windows around here. Pull up our documentation. Making a link to tools may not be a bad idea. I didn't do it on this one though. Alright, now it says here we have to make our directory, ISO Linux. Extract our source and then make our directory ISO Linux. And copy our stuff over. You need to move boot all over and remove the boot directory. You need to create a link back to the boot directory from ISO-Linux. Okay, then we had to build our ISO-Linux config. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all these old kernels that I don't need out of here. And other stuff like grub and initrd, I don't need any of that stuff. Only thing I want is my kernel, system map, and .config, and ISO-Linux.bin. Here we need to make our ISO-Linux config file. You can see here our default boot CD prompt is going to be on. Timeout, you can change that if you want, it's 40. Label is going to be our kernel, which is our kernel is going to be LFS kernel. You want to watch naming conventions with that. If you have dashes, underscores, or anything else like that, you may run into some problems. As a matter of fact, I did run into a few problems way in the past. I learned quickly from that just to leave it just like that. It's actually a bug report to follow somewhere out there about syslinux and naming conventions. It's mentioned in the documentation. Alright, this is our initrd shell. It's going to bail us out if we can't find a live CD, which we'll get into. Okay, I'm going to check this with vi. The reason why I use cat is for command completion, but you can check this with vi. What I like to do is I like to move the documentation actually behind this, and I just flick back and forth. I look for anything that jumps out of place, and if it jumps out of place, it's an indicator something's wrong. I go back and find it and fix it. Easy way to check. And the next session here is for PowerPC. If you have a PowerPC, it's not really a big deal. Alright, it says here we need to make a fake need write and RAM disk. We need to move etc var on home to fake need write. We need to make links from fake need write, etc to etc, var to var, root, and home. Okay, we'll list it out and we'll grep for CFR symbols what they're pointing to. Notice the escape character there for grepping for a symbol. Next thing we have to do is create a boot script to mount our initrd. Okay, and this is just creating the boot script. It's going to take your time. The reason why I use cat is for command completion. And he does it in the book. Not only does command completion save you on a little bit of time, but also prevents you from making mistakes that you don't necessarily need to do. Anything can happen, typos happen quite often. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll check that, make sure everything is lined up okay. A couple things jump out. Going line by line, just kind of checking it out, pulling it down so that I can just overlay it and see if anything jumps out. Pretty good. And we need to change mod executable our etc RAM disk, or etc init etc.rc.d init.t create RAM disk. We need to cd into rc sysinit.d. We need to make a link from this to our start level 0 create RAM disk. fstab. We need to change our fstab. Since we won't be using any partitions when we're booting, we need to get rid of these, and you can just omit them or just file documentation and just say something like edit me in there. This is very important too. You need to add a tempfs and a temp. Okay, just shore up the fstab a little. Don't forget everything after the pound sign is pretty much commented out, so it doesn't really matter what you type in here. Okay. Now we need to remove the file system check. Start up number 30. Check FS. Need to disable remounting of root as read write. Okay. And grep v remount and orig mounts into mount fs. And make that script executable. Make node libudev devices loop 0 blocked or block device 7 and 10. Now it says here, if you are ch rooted into the system, exit from the ch root and unmount any virtual kernel file systems. So do that, jump out. Now you're back as your host machine. Okay. Notice the little kernel, and we need a loop device. Now, if you have loop export, that's okay. But as a stock kernel or stock 2.6 kernel with nothing added, loop device is not there. You can check for that by looking for loop in your dev folder. If you don't see it, you don't have it. But you can grep for it, and again too, you can cat out your config and grep for it in there. And you need your loop device because you need to be able to mount your initrd in the next section. So if you don't have it, then you need to compile that in, and that's what I'm going to go through in the next one. Well, right now. But I'm not ch rooted anymore. I'm building a kernel for my host machine now. Like I said, it's not in my dev folder. Catting out my config for 2.1627. Okay. I'm going to look for loop. It's not set. and we need loop back. Now I already have a 2.6.22 kernel with loopback device support, but I wanted to simulate something. That was an error I ran into the first time where it really held me down for a bit. So I wanted to kind of emphasize that you need that. So I'm just copying the downloaded source that I had for a 2.2. I'm just re-extracting that package, and instead of having to go back to the kernel.org and pick up a 2.6.22 kernel. Okay. What's my time? I can't tell. Oh, 1290. That's it? Okay, you gotta be kidding me. Okay. So I'm extracting the kernel on the other side. And there it is. Now we have to beef up our host system kernel. Add the loopback device. Make it more proper. I'm actually going to make this kernel the same as the kernel that we're using on our target machine. Doesn't really matter with this. We can bloat this up as much as we want to. But we only need loopback device support, really. I got initrd RAM FS support and everything else in there. Just compile that in, because remember, you want these all to be built-ins, not modules. Actually, it really doesn't matter for this, though. I don't think it does. But built-in's okay. Same spiel as before. Make E2FS and EXT3 support. CD-ROM file system support. Okay. We're going to make it and make modules install and let it burn up. Okay. Now our host kernel is all done. We need to move that over. And I already have those kernels, but I'm going to get rid of them because I wanted to simulate an error that you may run into. I'm going to copy over our config 2.6.22, system map, same, and our kernel. And remove all my old sources. I can actually get rid of syslinux too. I don't need that. Okay. Now I want to remount my grub. I need to go and edit my grub again. And instead of booting the 1627 kernel, we need to boot the 22 kernel. Okay, we'll catch that on the next reboot. And as it says here, if you are CH rooted into your LFS system, exit from the CH root and return to your host system, unmount any virtual file system that are mounted in the LFS tree. So we already exited a long time ago from the chroot, right? But we never did reboot, and that's what we want to do now. So our machine should be up now. And now we're going to SSH back into the host. And we don't need to chroot into it anymore, into the target anymore. We just continue to build from out here. Alright, so we need to make sure that we have a node here. As you can see in the uname, it was a 1. Okay, we have loopback support. Good to go. Good to go. Su. I need to re-export our LFS variable and mount our target partition. Make node $LFS devram box 10. It already exists because we already made it before, and we need to 0 out and create our boot initrd. Put a file system on it, and let's mount it. $LFS mount. We need to create some device nodes here. It doesn't matter your spacing, but to keep it kind of nice and tidy, it would be a good idea to follow the spacing a little bit, somewhere similar to the book. These are all the device nodes that we're going to need. You can see here I'm not really tearing out the whole line. I'm more just taking out what I need, what I don't need, and changing. Okay, and we need to copy these commands over: bash mount, grep, unmount, and echo over to $LFS mount bin. Copy over test. Pivot root. Copy bash over, or create that link, and another link there. Now this here, I could have thrown them all in a string, but I didn't. The reason why is some of these change for me. I have libdl.so.2, which is okay, and I can use a lot of good tab completion going on here. libc.so.6, I think I have that. But I would never know if I had it or not if it didn't really use the tab completion. Well, I would. But libreadline so.5. The book says 6, but I only have 5, so we're just going to do that. Same thing with libhistory. blkid.so.0. .so.1 is okay. I screwed up there because I didn't put a space. Should be libuid. ld-linux.so.2. I have that, but there's one more command, or there's one more library I don't have. It's ld.so.1. Okay, so I don't have that. That did not stop me from booting. So if all else goes wrong, cat sleep and make note are here. It might be a good idea to put list in there too. I have experienced before when my initrd failed, or when I couldn't find the boot device and I had to hit initrd, I was left with those commands and didn't have sleep or didn't have list in there. But I've never put list in there yet, so I don't even know if it's a good idea. But I'm thinking about it on the next one. We need to make our Linux RC file. It's the first program executed by the kernel, and we'll find the CD-ROM drive, and then mount it as root LFS or root FS, and run sbin init3. We're going to use the volume ID is actually going to be our date that we're going to run. We're going to echo our date into this, and that's how we're going to actually find the CD. Don't forget to throw your double graders. That way you're catting into it, you're appending it, and you're not zeroing it out. You're not overwriting the file. And I could use vi here, but I just want some good command completion. Basically what's going to happen is we're going to run a whole bunch of tests and checks, and whatever falls out will be booting, or whatever falls out will be the device. I think that's how it goes. We have CD-ROM list. These are all our possible devices that we can boot from. Now we try to find the LFS boot CD by its ID. Now if a CD-ROM device equals nothing, this is actually gonna, I guess it's gonna loop through CD-ROM devices. And if it finds media, it's going to echo media found. And that's if it finds LFS boot CD. And it's going to break out the loop. Else if it doesn't find it, we're not going to run, it's not a LFS boot CD, and it's going to echo no media. Mount LFS as root FS. These are options here on just user prompts, really, of what they can do or what you can do if no CDs found. And this should be in the initrd shell. Else booting from LFS CD-ROM device, which is what you want to see. Need a pivot root to mount. You mount proc. Execute ch root. Hit S-pin in S 3. I could arrest out the console. Now I'm just checking it here. Make sure everything's fine. Same method, just flicking. Yeah, that's a lot of flicks at five times as 5 times the speed, isn't it? I did have a problem here with the spacing, so I went back and changed that. You can see that down there. Okay. Alright. Now we need to make that executable, our Linux RC file. We need to unmount our mounted initrd, and we need to zip it up. I'm going to do a size check here and see how much size we have. My target was 700. I'm at 607. That'll work. Okay, that line that scrolled by up there, I can't really back up because I don't know the controls of this thing. But that line that was up there was for Squash FS. Okay, if you use Squash FS, you guys really need to read about that. I wanted to do that, but I wanted to keep it as original as possible. Don't forget this line either. Touch $FS Don't forget that. That's very important. I wanted to use Squash FS, but I had never used Squash FS before. And the 200 some that I built that were actually kind of like fails. So I didn't really want to venture into that. Don't forget to remove LFS boot CD. Okay, and this next line here is we're just making an ISO with it. But don't forget to remove the LFS boot CD, because this partition can be saved on your hard drive, and basically you can beef this up in time and just keep burning live CDs off of this partition, new revisions or say, and every time a LFS boot CD will be made, it's a good idea to remove any of them before you actually make another one. Okay, and that's going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let that go ahead and cook off, and I have to after this is all done, I have to S-copy this over to my desktop. Then I'm going to try it in VMware, and then I'm going to burn it to a physical disk and see what happens. So am I done? Yep. Okay. So bring it back, and we'll see if it boots in the live CD or in the VMware. No, not VMware. Why am I saying VMware? VirtualBox. Holy tremolies! Giving away my history. Eek. Peace out.